Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss important news appearing in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 26 April 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's start our today's discussion. This news appears on page number 5. It says, Centre's grant set to give fillip to cell-based meat research. The clean alternative is aimed at revolutionizing food system. Now this news talks about clean meat or a cultured meat which is grown in cell cultured or in a lab rather than in an animal's body. Now this news highlights that National Research Center on Meat as well as the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology has initiated a research aimed at producing meat through cellular agriculture or cells sourced from animals and later cultivated into meat. And this meat, which is sourced from animal cells and then cultivated into meat, is also referred as clean meat. Now, this topic from your prelims point of view gets covered under general science, and mains this topic gets covered under technology under GS paper 3. The potential benefits of clean meat includes sustainability, environmental friendliness, food safety, in terms of nutrition, as well as animal welfare. As to procure clean meat, there is no need to slaughter animals. However, there are still certain challenges with respect to producing clean meat. It includes scaling up the production process of clean meat, reducing cost of such clean meat on a large scale, as well as adding fat to such clean meats. Now, another potential benefit with respect to clean meat can be said to be its nutritionally equivalent value, which will be equivalent to conventional animal meat. So, these can be said to be some of the potential benefits as well as challenges with respect to clean meat. Now, Department of Biotechnology under Ministry of Science and Technology has decided to fund Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology as well as National Research Center on Meat for research on cell-based meat or clean meat. The Department of Biotechnology will help in developing a technology to take laboratory cell culture process to cell-based meat production. Further, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology will also collaborate with Good Food Institute and Human Society International India for the production of cell-based meat or clean meat. The Atal Incubation Center of the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology has been partnering with Human Society International to develop and promote clean meat sector. So this again becomes an important aspect to be remembered from your prelims perspective. Now the AIC, that is Atal Incubation Center at the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, is the premier incubator which focuses on promoting entrepreneurship in life sciences. It supports startups in health, pharmaceutical and biotechnology sector, and also it supports innovations in these fields of life sciences. The AIC as well as HSI have also announced the launch of Center for Predictive Human Model System, that is CPHMS, and CPHMS will be dedicated to promote new approach of scientific research using non-animal models. So this becomes an important highlight of Center for Predictive Human Model, as it is dedicated to promote new approach of scientific research using non-animal models. And this facility would propagate non-animal methodologies in life sciences research in the country. So the Atal Incubation Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology becomes very important for us to understand from a prelims perspective. Thus, this news with respect to clean meat becomes very important from our examination perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news is with respect to the ongoing case of sexual harassment against the Chief Justice of India. Now there are two articles based on this same issue. One is on page number 8 as a lead article. It says, an illustrative case. The court needs to show that the principles of due processes are just as applicable to one of its own. So basically in this article, the author has tried to highlight that the principle of due process of law must be applied on the judiciary, including the Chief Justice of India, as it is applied on any other individual of this country. The next article appears on page number 9. Now this article is in a form of an interview given by two advocates of Supreme Court. It says, has the Supreme Court been discredited? So based on the allegation of sexual harassment on the Chief Justice of India, various questions have emerged, especially with respect to which the manner in which this particular case was handled by the Chief Justice of India himself. Now this news on page number 9 highlights that on April 20, when a complaint of sexual harassment against the Chief Justice of India became public, he responded by constituting a special bench comprising himself and two other judges. And it is here where the entire issue of conflict of interest emerged. This conflict of interest invited sharp responses from many in the legal fraternity. 3 days later, the Supreme Court instituted a panel headed by Justice S.A. Bobde to examine the charges against the Chief Justice of India. So basically, after constituting the special bench comprising himself, the Chief Justice of India then withdrew himself from the case. Further, in this article appearing on page number 8, the author has referred the present case where allegations of sexual harassment has been made on the present Chief Justice of India, and also the fact that the lady was unfairly dismissed from service. The lady has further alleged that she and her family were subjected to false and malicious charges leading to series of criminal cases against her and her family. So considering these allegations against the Chief Justice of India, the author says that this case must be fairly investigated and due process of law must be followed strictly and transparently. Now these can be said to be some of the issues emanating from this particular case involving the allegation of sexual harassment against the Chief Justice of India. First of all is with respect to conflict of interest. Since the Chief Justice of India himself constituted a special bench comprising himself and two other judges. Based on such allegations against the Chief Justice of India, the Chief Justice of India said that this was a larger conspiracy and it undermined the judicial independence or the independence of judiciary. And this was an allegation made by the Chief Justice of India that this case of sexual harassment against him was a larger conspiracy and it undermined the independence of judiciary. So it is here where the author highlights in the lead article that the Chief Justice of India as master of roster has great authority not only with respect to selection of bench but also with respect to allocation of judicial work. And this was the exact point which was highlighted through a press conference in January 2018 by four senior most judges of the Supreme Court with respect to the then Chief Justice of India on being as master of roster with respect to selection of bench and allocation of judicial work. So as per the author, it is here where the Supreme Court did not follow the due process of law. And it is in this aspect the author has mentioned about a famous dictum of Lord Chief Justice Hewart of King's Bench, where he said that justice should not only be done but should manifestly and undoubtedly be seen to be done. So after this entire issue of conflict of interest, the Chief Justice of India withdrew himself from this special bench. And thereby a committee was formed to investigate the matter against the Chief Justice of India. Now this committee comprises of Justice S.A. Bobde, Justice Indu Malhotra and Justice Indira Banerjee. However, questions have been raised with respect to composition of this particular committee headed by Justice S.A. Bobde. First of all is with respect to the composition of this particular committee, where this interview raises a concern that why this particular committee with respect to sexual harassment case is not led by a woman judge, as there are women judges in the Supreme Court of India. Another issue is with respect to the independence with which these judges will be able to investigate, as administratively these judges who are part of this committee are under the administrative control of the Chief Justice of India. So this interview is highlighted that there must be someone who is senior to the Chief Justice of India, like someone who is a retired judge of the Supreme Court and who has no connection to the person whose actions are being examined. Further, there is another issue of two parallel proceedings, as there is another bench which is examining the affidavit filed by a lawyer who claims that he was asked to frame the Chief Justice of India. And it is here where the allegation of Chief Justice of India with respect to undermining the judiciary also comes into prominence. Further, this particular interview also highlights that the Chief Justice of India, while investigating this case, should not have equated himself with the institution and rather have left the case to be handled by some other judges. Another issue with respect to this committee is with respect to its authority and with respect to the implementation of its investigation. Hence, these are some of the important issues which have been highlighted in these two articles with respect to allegation of sexual harassment against the Chief Justice of India. Now, there is another important legal maxim which says that no one can be a judge in their own cause. So, it is here where the Chief Justice of India should not have involved himself, especially where a case was filed against him on allegations of sexual harassment. Now, another issue highlighted in the interview appearing on page number 9 is that there is a gender sensitization internal complaints committee with respect to the Supreme Court of India, and it generally requires the permission of Chief Justice of India to investigate any cases of sexual harassment against any judge. However, there is no provision with respect to the Chief Justice of India. It says that the CJI's permission is required before anyone can proceed with any complaint. Further, as per this interview, this gender sensitization internal complaints committee cover other employees of the Supreme Court but does not cover Chief Justice of India. So, considering all these aspects, the author in the lead article argues that the Supreme Court in such exceptional cases must rise up to the occasion and establish an ethical, moral and unbiased precedent. And only the Supreme Court by its own action can ensure judicial integrity. So it is here where the due process of law must be followed by Supreme Court in the present case involving the Chief Justice of India. Now, due process is integral to court's foundations and Constitution's guarantee of equal protection under Article 14. Now, this particular news as of now is in transition, so let's wait for the investigation to complete and for the final order involving the Chief Justice of India. With this, let's move on to the next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 8 in the editorial section. It says, uncertain times. India needs to diversify its oil supplier base and increase domestic sources of energy. Now, this particular editorial is with respect to the rising prices of Brent crude oil and also its likely impact on India. Now, this editorial says that the decision of the United States not to extend the waiver beyond 1st May 2019 has led to an increase in price of Brent crude oil from $71.97 per barrel to $75 per barrel in the last week. So, this increase of roughly around $4 has been in just 1 week. Now, this increase in price of oil will adversely impact the supply of oil in the global market. Now, this topic in your prelims examination gets covered under current events of international importance as well as Indian economy, whereas in your mains it gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically under economy. After the price of the Brent crude oil hit a low of $50 per barrel, OPEC decided to restrict the output of oil, and this restriction in output of supply of oil also resulted in increase in price of the Brent crude oil per barrel. Hence, decision of OPEC as well of United States can be said to be the two reasons with respect to increase in the prices of Brent crude oil. Now, with respect to the rising price of Brent crude, there are challenges for India, as India imports more than 10% of its crude oil from Iran, and so the government needs to immediately find alternative suppliers. Further, the increase in price of Brent crude oil will have an impact on India with respect to current account deficit, fiscal deficit, as well as on inflation, as increase in price of crude oil will increase the current account deficit. Further, it will also increase the fiscal deficit of the government, especially in the election season. And this will also impact the finances of the upcoming government, which will be formed after this election. Now, an increase in price of Brent crude oil might lead to an increase in the price of diesel as well as petrol in India. This probable rise in diesel and petrol prices will also impact the transportation cost with respect to various products, and hence we can say that there might be a likely chance of a rise in inflation with respect to increase in price of petroleum or diesel. So, considering the rise in price of Brent crude oil in the international market, India needs to take steps to diversify its supplier base with respect to oil. Further, India needs to work towards increasing domestic sources of energy supplies. And also, India needs to open up its renewable sector for more investments as it will reduce over dependence on the crude oil. So these can be said to be some of the decisions which India needs to take with respect to the rising price of Brent crude oil in the international market. Now with respect to Brent crude oil, a question was asked in the year 2011. The question was, in the context of global oil prices, Brent crude oil is frequently referred to in the news. What does this term imply? Options were, it is a major classification of crude oil, it is sourced from North Sea, and it does not contain sulfur. So, going through this question, we understand that you must know certain basics with respect to Brent crude oil. Now, the word Brent crude is a major trading classification of sweet light crude oil, and this serves as a benchmark price for purchase of oil worldwide. Now, the Brent crude is described as light because of its relatively low density, and it is described as sweet because of its low sulfur content. And Brent crude is extracted from North Sea. So after understanding the basics on Brent crude, we understand that this is a major classification of crude oil. It is sourced from North Sea, whereas the third statement that it does not contain sulfur at all becomes incorrect as it has low amount of sulfur content. So in this, the statement 1 and 2 becomes correct. Now on this note, let us also understand the different types of classification of crude oil. It says that the classification are made on basis of sulfur content as well. Crude oil with low content of sulfur means sweet, and the presence of high content of sulfur is referred as sour. It says that the different types of crude oil are classified on the basis of American petroleum gravity as well as viscosity. And the properties of crude oil may vary in terms of proportion of hydrocarbon elements, sulfur content, etc., which is extracted from different part of the world. Now, based on the classification, crude oil can be defined as or categorized as light crude oil, medium oil, and heavy oil. Light crude oil is defined as an API gravity higher than 31.1 degree, whereas medium oil is defined as having an API gravity between 22.3 to 31.1, and heavy oil is defined as having an API gravity below 22.3 degree API. It further says that one of the largest and major classifications of crude oil is Brent blend, which is found in North Sea, and this has an API gravity of 38.3 degrees and 0.37% of sulfur, and this blend of crude oil comes from 15 various oil fields in the North Sea. So these can be said to be some of the important aspects with respect to Brent crude oil as well as with respect to classification of crude oil. Thus, in this editorial, we need to understand the impact of rising crude oil prices with respect to India and also the basics about Brent crude oil. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 9. It says, Breaking New Ground. The Madras High Court's recent judgment is truly path-breaking for the LGBTQ community. Now, this judgment of Madras High Court has extended marriage rights to transgender community, and this judgment is inspired from the US Supreme Court judgment which has extended rights of homosexuals, especially with respect to marriage. Now in this article, a reference has also been given to the judgment of Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India. Now this topic in your prelims examination gets covered under social issues, and in your mains it gets covered under GS paper 2, especially under social justice. Now in order to understand the nuances of the decision of Madras High Court, first of all, let us go through the basic tenets of the decision of Constitution Bench on section 377 of Indian Penal Code and also with respect to rights of transgenders. Now, as you already know that the 5-judge Constitution Bench in this landmark judgment named as Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India has decriminalized sexual relations between consenting homosexual adults in a historic judgment. So basically this judgment has decriminalized or allowed sexual relations between consenting homosexual adults. The court in the judgment held that the LGBT community has a right to realization of its basic right to companionship so long as such a companion is consensual, free from the vice of deceit, force, coercion, and does not result in violation of fundamental rights of others. So the Supreme Court eventually allowed the right to companionship so long as such companionship is consensual or free from any deceit or coercion. The court also said that even though the percentage of LGBT community is less, their right to privacy must be protected. So the court, while giving this judgment, also referred to the judgment of K. Puttaswamy and held that the right to privacy of transgender community must be protected. And in this aspect, the court found Section 377 of Indian Penal Code violative of their fundamental rights, including right to privacy. So on this note, the Supreme Court said that Section 377 of Indian Penal Code would not apply to consensual same-sex acts between homosexuals, heterosexuals, lesbians, and other sexual minorities. However, Section 377 of IPC would apply to cases of bestiality and non-consensual sexual acts. Thus, the Supreme Court decriminalized sexual relations between consenting homosexual adults. So, the Madras High Court, in the case of Arun Kumar and Sirija versus Inspector General of Registration and others, have extended enjoyment of civil rights, especially those pertaining to marriage, to trans persons or transgenders. So on this note, this article says that this judgment also opens doors to larger LGBTQ community for availing civil rights, including marriage, succession, as well as inheritance. Thus, in this particular judgment, the Madras High Court held that a properly solemnized marriage between a male and a trans woman is valid under the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955. And on this note, the Registrar of Marriages is bound to register such a marriage under the law, and he cannot say that he will not register such a marriage. Now, this particular judgment of Madras High Court also quoted the judgment of Nalsa versus Union of India of 2014, which also held that transgender persons have the right to decide their self-identified gender. Another important aspect of this judgment is that it has extended the definition of the word bride. It says that the expression bride which occurs in Hindu Marriage Act cannot have a static or fixed meaning, and the court is free to apply the current meaning of a law with respect to present day situations or present day conditions. And present day situations as well as conditions are also defined by various Supreme Court judgments, including the Supreme Court judgment of right to privacy, as well as the judgment of 5-judge Constitution Bench in Navteej Singh Johar versus Union of India. Now, as already mentioned, this particular judgment of Madras High Court also referred to the judgment of K.S. Puttaswamy, that is with respect to right to privacy, and also a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court of United States in the judgment of Obergefell versus Hodges in the year 2015, in which the US Supreme Court held that fundamental right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples by both due process clause and equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution. So this judgment of Madras High Court also referred both these judgments of right to privacy case with respect to India and this particular judgment of United States Supreme Court, where it held that the fundamental right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples also by the due process clause as well as by the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution. Thus, this particular judgment, which extends marrying rights to trans women, becomes extremely important, not only from our examination perspective, but also from the perspective of social justice. So let us understand some of the impact of this particular judgment given by Madras High Court. Now, this particular judgment has extended the legal construction or meaning of the word bride as well as bridegroom with respect to changing circumstances, realities shaped by different Supreme Court judgments. So we can say that after the judgment in Navteej Singh Johar versus Union of India and also of the US Supreme Court judgment on right of homosexuals, civil rights such as marriage, succession as well as inheritance can be extended to LGBTQ couples who have decided to get married consensually, or such couples who have married in accordance with existing laws, including the LGBTQ couples. And these people are not in violation of any other laws of the land. So, rights to marriage, succession, or inheritance can also be extended to the LGBTQ community. Thus, this article with respect to social issue becomes extremely important to understand from an examination perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 13 with respect to banking ombudsman. It says claims to RBI Ombudsman increased by 25% in financial year 2018. The news highlights that the number of complaints by bank customers to the Reserve Bank of India's banking ombudsman has increased by 25% in the financial year 2017-18 as compared to the previous year. So, in this news analysis, you must know certain basic points with respect to the banking ombudsman. Now, it says that the Banking Ombudsman Scheme 1995 was notified under Section 35A of the Banking Regulation Act of 1949. Now, after various amendments, it has been named as the Banking Ombudsman Scheme of 2006. Now, the aims and objectives of the Ombudsman Scheme is to provide a quick and cost-free resolution mechanism for complaints relating to deficiency of banking services. The Banking Ombudsman is a quasi-judicial authority created to resolve customer complaints against banks relating to certain services provided by such banks. Now, this topic of Banking Ombudsman gets covered under Economy in your prelims examination, and your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 under Economic Development. Now, this particular question was asked in the prelims of 2010. The question was with reference to the institution of Banking Ombudsman in India, which of the statements is not correct. Options were: first, the Banking Ombudsman is appointed by the Reserve Bank of India. Second, the Banking Ombudsman can consider complaints from non-resident Indians having accounts in India. Third, the orders passed by the Banking Ombudsman are final and binding on parties concerned. Fourth, the services provided by Banking Ombudsman is free of any fee. So, in order to answer this question, we must know certain basic facts with respect to Banking Ombudsman. Now, as per the Banking Ombudsman Scheme of 2006, the Reserve Bank of India may appoint one or more of its officers in the rank of Chief General Manager or General Manager to be known as Banking Ombudsman, and they shall carry out the functions entrusted to them under this, and a Banking Ombudsman appointed under the scheme may be made for a period not exceeding 3 years at a time. Now, this particular scheme is applicable to scheduled commercial banks, scheduled primary urban cooperative bank, as well as the regional rural banks. Further, Ombudsman also covers deposits taking NBFCs, that is non-banking financial companies, and it also applies to the non-deposit taking NBFCs having total assets of more than 100 crores. So these are the different kinds of banks and non-banking financial companies on which the Banking Ombudsman applies. Now, any customer can approach the RBI's Ombudsman if the bank does not reply on the complaints of such customers within a period of 1 month, or if the bank rejects the complaint of the customer, or if the complainant or the customer is not satisfied with the reply given by the bank. However, the Banking Ombudsman does not charge any fee for filing and resolving customers' complaints. Now, in this particular question, the third option was incorrect. That is, the orders passed by the Banking Ombudsman are final and binding on the parties concerned. No, this statement is not correct, as the orders are neither final nor binding on the parties. So, in this, the correct answer was C. So, these can be said to be some of the important aspects with respect to Banking Ombudsman in India. Now, the next news appears on page number 12. It says, scared Muslim refugees in Negombo flee homes. They came fleeing persecution in their countries and now being treated as adversaries. Now, in this news, you must know about this place known as Negombo, as UPSC has asked important places which have been in news. And considering this attack on Sri Lanka, this particular news with respect to Muslim refugees in Sri Lanka becomes important from your upcoming prelims examination. Now, apart from Negombo, you must also know important cities of Sri Lanka, which includes Colombo, Negombo, Ratnapura, Galle, Matara, Hambantota, which is also a port, Kandy, Batticaloa, Anuradhapura, Trikonamali, Mannar, Jaffna, Mullaitivu, etc. So these are some of the important places which you must know with respect to Sri Lanka, as questions with respect to important cities as well as their locations can be asked in your upcoming prelims examination. Now after our discussion, let's move on to the practice question for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. Now this particular question was asked in the prelims of 2012 by UPSC. It says, other than resistant to pests, what are the prospects for which genetically engineered plants have been created? Options were to enable them to withstand drought, to increase the nutritive value of the produce, to enable them to grow and do photosynthesis in spaceships and space stations, and to increase their shelf life. In this, the statements 1, 2, and 4 were correct, whereas the third statement was incorrect, as genetically engineered plants can grow in any place where they get optimum atmosphere with respect to their growth and not necessarily to do photosynthesis in spaceships and space stations. So in this, the correct answer was C, that is 1, 2 and 4. Now another question was also asked in the prelims of 2012 with respect to BT brinjal. It said, what are the reasons for people's resistance to the introduction of BT brinjal in India? Options were, BT brinjal has been created by inserting a gene from a soil fungus into its genome. No, this statement was incorrect, as BT brinjal is created by inserting a crystal protein gene from soil bacteria Bacillus thuringiensis. So in this, the first statement was incorrect. The second statement said the seeds of BT brinjal are terminator seeds and therefore the farmers have to buy the seeds before every season from the seed companies. No, the seeds of BT brinjal are not terminator seeds. Now the technology used in terminator seeds is genetic use restriction technology, which basically shuts reproductive abilities of seeds, making the second generation seeds sterile. However, the BT seeds are not terminator seeds. Hence, in this, the second statement is incorrect. Third, there is an apprehension that the consumption of BT brinjal may have adverse impact on health. Yes, in those times, there was certain apprehension, especially with respect to consumption of BT brinjal. Hence, the third statement was correct. Fourth, there is some concern that introduction of BT brinjal may have adverse effect on the biodiversity. Now, this statement was also correct. So, in this, the correct answer was C, that is 3 and 4 only. Now these are your next practice questions. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. The question says, consider the following statements about Brent crude. First, it is also referred as sweet heavy crude oil. No, it is referred as sweet light crude oil because of its relatively lower density. Second, it serves as a benchmark price for purchase of crude oil. Yes, the statement is correct. Third, American petroleum gravity, that is API of Brent crude, is around 38 degrees. Yes, this statement is also correct as we have seen. So in this, the correct statement is 2 and 3 only, that is A. The next question says, consider the following statements. First, Cellular Molecular Biology in collaboration with National Research Center on Meat has initiated research on producing meat through cellular agriculture. Yes, the statement is correct. Second, potential benefits of clean meat includes sustainability, environmental friendliness, and animal welfare. Yes, this statement is also correct. The question is, which of the statements given above are incorrect? Both these statements are correct. Hence, in this, D becomes the correct answer. That is, neither 1 nor 2 are incorrect. The Prelims Compass 2019 for History, Art and Culture of India is now available at Amazon. The link for Amazon website for History, Art and Culture of India has been provided in the description box below. With this, let's move on to the question for the day.